The views expressed in this program are those of its hosts and guests and do not necessarily reflect the views of Fox Sports Net and its affiliates.
David Clyde was the talk of baseball when he made his major league debut right out of high school in 1973, a move that very well may have ruined a promising career. And he'll join me to share his story tonight on The Last Word. A very good evening to you. Welcome to The Last Word in Los Angeles. I am Jim Rome. We have an excellent show for you tonight. Former big league phenom David Clyde will join me momentarily. His first manager in the bigs, Whitey Herzog, will drop by later on as well. First up, back on July 27th, 1973, David Clyde made his major league debut with the Texas Rangers in what was, at the time, one of the most publicized sporting events in the country's history. And now, nearly 29 years later, his story remains a textbook example of why baseball might not want to try anything like that ever again. I am very happy to welcome him to the program. David, thank you for joining me. How are you?
Jim, I'm great. It's an honor.
Well, it's nice to have you too, David. Of course, you took the mound as an 18-year-old right out of high school, attending the senior prom one day, pitching against the Minnesota Twins the next. No minor leagues, no preparation, 35,000 plus in the stands, a huge media contingency, and the world was watching. What do you remember about that night?
Well, even almost 30 years after the moment happened, it's still awful difficult to put into words. It's a dream come true. You grow up your entire life dreaming of pitching in the big leagues and performing against your heroes and your idols and, you know, striking out the last guy in the bottom of the ninth inning in the World Series or hitting the home run in the bottom of the ninth inning of the World Series to win, and all of a sudden you wake up one day and you're living your dream. So even to this day, it's awful difficult to put those moments into words.
You know, it certainly was a great, great night, but did you have any business being out there? Were you in any way, shape, or form ready for what was to come both on the field and off the field?
On the field, Jim, I think I had the ability to pitch at that level. The biggest problem I had, and I think it took me maybe 15, 20 years to realize it, was I had made this huge jump from high school to the big leagues and thought because of this large jump, my talent had to be that much better. When in all honesty, by trying that much harder to be that much better, I was actually defeating the purpose of being out there. Now, as far as being ready for the game, as far as mentally, and being ready for everything that goes with it as far as off the field and all the peripherals that go with it, no, I wasn't anywhere near ready. I didn't live by any means a sheltered childhood, but you know, you grow up your entire life, your mom and dad try to protect you and take care of you. They try to prepare you for the world the best they can, and my folks did a great job. But there's just no way until you actually leave home and experience those moments, the failures of being by yourself, of nobody really out there to protect you but yourself, and until you realize
David, let me jump in. That's a key point right there. You were alone. You might have had 24 other teammates, but as an 18-year-old on the road trying to figure it all out, you really didn't have anybody. And then you had teammates who befriended you and said, hey, kid, come out with us. Why don't you have a few pops with us? And at the time, it seemed like a good thing. In fact, it seemed like an honor. They want me to drink with them, go out with them. But as it turns out, that was probably the worst thing that could have happened.
Absolutely, Jim. I mean, I'm not going to deny the fact that I did some things that weren't right. At the same time, in some instances, I don't think I didn't do anything different than any other 18 or 19-year-old that's away from home the first time. The only difference was I was in front of 30, 40,000 people at a time, and several million people read about my job the next day after I'd performed the night before. So the things I experienced, I had to grow up in an awful hurry. And yes, I did consider it maybe an honor that they wanted to befriend me, and I don't think in any way that they were out to really take advantage of me. They may have been, but I really don't think so. I think, you know, the Texas Rangers in 1973, we were quite a collection of, for lack of a better word, misfits, and not trying to be disrespectful to any of my teammates, but we had a few guys that were on the way up, and we had a lot of guys that were on the way down. So.
Yeah, Dave, that's how it goes. For instance, it's a long, long year. You're away from home. You get out. You play games late. You got to blow off a little bit of steam. You're all wound up at the end of the game. So guys go out and they have a few pops. And that's not the end of the world if you're responsible about it. But it got to be a little bit more than that. In fact, when you start showing up hungover and it affects performance, it's more than a few pops. Is that what it came to?
Well, I never really had a drinking problem, but at times it did, you know, it was something that needed to be controlled. You know, it wasn't to the point where I needed to go somewhere and sober up, but it did get to the point where, you know, I'd see these guys going out every night and they'd ask me to come along, and rather than being what everybody perceived as a responsible adult at that time and mature beyond my years, I wanted to be one of the guys. And, you know, we were a ball club that lost 100 ball games, and that's nothing to be proud of. Something that I didn't realize is that it is a business and it's a job, and it became where all of a sudden it wasn't a lot of fun anymore. It wasn't a game for me anymore. It was becoming a job. You know,
for instance, David, if you didn't have a drinking problem, you may have had a manager problem when Billy Martin came in. Now, Whitey Herzog, who's going to join us in a few moments, was there first, and he had some questions about whether or not you should start at the big league level. Billy Martin followed after that. You got off to a good start your second year. You were 3-0, and Billy Martin promptly sends you to the bullpen and doesn't use you. Did he have it in for you from day one?
I don't really know, Jim. I mean, I never did sit down and talk with Billy about it, and that's one thing I learned in my life at that age when I was 19. You know, when you're 19 years old and you're brought up to respect your elders and your coaches, you don't really question things, and I didn't question anything at that time. And after having suffered through the year I did in '74, of going 30 days without being allowed to pitch, and when I did want to work on things, I wasn't allowed to work on them, and if I did get to work on them, if I bounced a curveball in the bullpen and it went out on the field, I was immediately told to sit down. I was a very confused young man, and didn't really have anybody to turn to or talk to about it. Too proud, I guess, to go to Billy and say, hey, send me down. I want to pitch somewhere. Just let me pitch somewhere. I didn't want to admit to him that I couldn't do it at that level.
David, I think part of this is you don't want to say anything ill or spread any ill will about somebody who's not here to defend himself. But just as you were brought up to respect your elders, probably you were brought up thinking that your manager had your best interest in mind. Was that the case with Billy Martin?
No, sir, it was not. And as you said, I find it difficult to talk about somebody who can't defend themselves. But at the same time, I told my dad when I was getting ready for spring training in 1975 that if I ever had to go through a year like I suffered through in '74, that I'd hang it up and not play anymore. And for somebody that's all they ever dreamed about, that was a difficult statement to make. But at the same time, when you go 3-0, and by no means was I the stopper of the staff at that point, but each time I did stop a 4-game losing streak, I just happened to be in the right place at the right time and performing well. And then to sit and not be given any reasons. Like you said, you feel that they have your best interests at heart. And if nothing else, like I said, what I learned from that is, and if you talk to people that know me today, I am very opinionated. I don't bite my tongue anymore. If I have something to say, I speak it. Sometimes I'm too blunt to people.
Right.
But they have to understand, I made a promise to myself after that year that if it ever came to it, I would kick a door down to find out what was going on.
All right, we'll talk more about that, David, when we come back. In fact, when we do another segment, we'll be joined by Whitey Herzog, who was your manager with the Rangers back in 1973. That's up next when The Last Word returns, right after this. Once again, by former Major League Baseball phenom David Clyde. We are also joined now by veteran Major League manager Whitey Herzog, who was David's first manager with the Texas Rangers back in 1973. Whitey, great to have you on the program. How are you?
Good, Jim. I'm just happy to be here, and it was nice to hear David talk again, and got some fond memories of that young man.
Well, it's good to have you, Skip. You know, Whitey, you've said in the past that what happened to David Clyde was one of the worst things that you had ever seen in Major League Baseball. Do you still feel that way today?
I can remember the fact that we knew David was going to be our #1 pick long before he was drafted in the June draft, and I was over at Six Flags on an off day with my family, and I was paged, and I went to the telephone, and it was Bob Short calling. And he was over at the Clyde's residence, and he told me that he could sign David right now if I would allow him to pitch 2 starts in the big leagues. And I didn't see anything wrong with that. If his mother and father David wanted to pitch 2 times the big leagues, that's fine with me. We were about 40 games under 500, mired in last place, and weren't going anywhere, so what difference would it make?
Right.
We were a team that wasn't drawing people. We weren't making money. Bob Shard, our owner, was a fast buck guy. He had no plan. He had no plan for the future. If he could make some money this weekend or the night that David Clyde made his debut, he was going to make it. And you can't blame him for that because that's the way he was. Well, David came in, and he's going to start this ball game, and we hadn't seen a packed house in Texas Stadium, Arlington Stadium, since not even on opening day.
It was such a great night, and it was a great start for David. But, I mean, can any 18-year-old, Whitey, based on your experience, any 18-year-old at any point be expected to step right in, take a spot in a rotation, and pitch effectively in Major League Baseball
Well, Jim,
right out of high school?
You're asking me something that wasn't going to happen. He was going to start 2 times. I'm not talking about putting him in the rotation.
Right.
I'm trying to tell you a story of why he went into the rotation.
Right.
He won his first ball game. He pitched 5 innings. And he pitched very well.
Fair enough. He packed the house. There was a buzz. There was an excitement. But I would imagine as an 18-year-old, if you knew you had a kid who could win 200 games, more than 200 games, and you had a career that was going to play out over 10, 12, or 15 years, I'm not sure that it would be the risk of 2 sellouts. I'm not sure that I would want that risk.
Well, I don't think that pitching in the big leagues at 18 is going to hurt somebody if you do it the right way. I mean, I think David's problems, you brought up a lot of drinking problems. I don't think that was David's problems. When I got fired in September, and Billy Martin came in maybe a week later and so forth, and I went to the Angels the next year as a coach, I was amazed that David not only was on the Ranger Ball Club, I thought he certainly would pitch at Double-A that year every 5 days and pitch in rotation there, or I certainly expected him to go to the instructional league in the fall and pitch with kids his own age there.
Right.
None of those things happened. I mean, but what bothered me was, I mean, they had Jenkins and Bibby, and I think Hargan won a lot of ball games for him that year. And David, like he said, was 3-0. He stopped 3-4 game losing streaks, and he wasn't in the rotation. And the second time I seen the Texas Rangers, David hadn't pitched in 20 days.
So, David, let me get you back in here. David, what do you think? Would it have worked?
What I'm trying to tell you is, if you're going to keep a prospect, a young prospect, whether he's a catcher, pitcher, outfielder, or a pitcher, it's okay to keep him if you play him, and it's okay to keep him if you don't hurt him mentally. But when you got a guy and all of a sudden you set him down and you don't pitch him in rotation, well, then you have to send him out.
And that's what happened.
He don't sit on a big league bench.
Right, and Billy sat him in the bully and didn't use him. David, to Whitey's point, could it have worked, even as an 18-year-old, if they used you properly and you were run out there every 4th or 5th day and you got your repetitions in? Would this have worked out? I mean, is this basically about Billy not using you?
It could have worked. I mean, there's been some guys that have gone to the big leagues over the history of the game, especially if you go back into the era of the Fellers and the K-lines and such, when the level of competition was quite a bit keener. It's not that it isn't any different today. It's just that the talent's been diluted a little bit because we now have, what, 30 Major League ball clubs? Instead of, back then, I think we had 16. So the talent was quite a bit more compact and such, and so I think I think I was proving that I could compete at the big league level at my second year. As I said, I was 3-0 and then sat for 20 days. So for whatever reason, and I think it's been proven out over Billy's career, all except for one stop when he was at Oakland, Billy did not like using young players. And Billy really never got along with his pitching staff. So I fell into 2 eras there, or 2 slots. I'm a young player and I'm a pitcher. And so I had 2 strikes against me really before it all began.
Whitey, what do you think? Billy, and I agree with what David just said, but why do you know, because you managed against Billy, he wanted to win badly. And if David gave him a chance to win every 5th day and he wanted to win that badly, why would he not use him?
Well, that's what I don't know. But the thing I don't understand, as much as he wanted to win, that has nothing to do with David Clyde. If David Clyde is not good enough to pitch in your rotation at the big league level, David Clyde, at 19 years old, must be sent to the minors and pitch where he can pitch every 5th day and get 150, 60 innings in professional baseball. bring him back in
Jim.
September, but he's got to pitch every 5th day.
David, there's one point that I need to make before we wrap this up. What's truly sad in this whole thing, you retired. You finally had enough of the whole thing at age 26 and said, I'm through with the whole process, and you retired. Little did you know, you were just 27 days short of getting your pension, 27 Major League Service days short. At what point did you find out that you came up just short?
Well, I knew when I retired that I was coming up short, and I think to jump in a little bit about Whitey was calling, not realizing why Billy was doing the things they're doing. There's a couple of fellows out there that are trying to, or have written a movie and trying to sell it about me, Richard and Michael Julian, and the title of it's called Squeeze Play, which I think in some instances describes exactly what I got caught in with Billy and the front office. Billy, things I've read, and like I said, Billy never talked to me, but things I've read about Billy, Billy wanted to send me down. I did not have a problem with that. I wanted to pitch. I wanted to play. I didn't care when I first was drafted if they'd given me 50 cents in a bus ride to Pocatello, Idaho. I wanted to play professional baseball. The front office, as Whitey said earlier, I was putting people in the ballpark. They were needing money very badly to stay in business or remain in the Texas area. And I was providing that infusion of cash. In 1973, we only drew 560,000 people. I was responsible for 260 or 70,000 people in less than half a season. So the front office wanted me there. Billy didn't want me there.
What's amazing about the whole story, sad as it is, and as amazing it is, there are still unanswered questions even to this day. David, as you point out, still conjecture. An amazing story, though. David Clyde telling his story. Whitey Herzog was the manager there as well. Gentlemen, I hate to say it, but we are out of time, but I'm glad that we could spend some time and talk about that. Thank you very much both for joining us, and good luck to you.
Thanks, Jim. It's been a pleasure.
Nice to have you, David. Whitey also. All right, I'll be right back to wrap things up for tonight. Do not go anywhere. It's been quite some time since David and Whitey have spoken to one another, and they shared a special moment after we finished taping that last segment, a moment that they did not mind us sharing with you. So tonight's last word comes to you from David Clyde and Whitey Herzog. I'm Jim Rome. Thank you for watching.
If I ever get a chance to get you those 27 days, I'm going to get them for you.
Whitey, I loved playing for you.
Well, listen, the other thing is,
I'm sorry.
if I were
I
you,
didn't mean to get...
I think the Texas Rangers owe you those 27 days.